Brenda says Jose, meaning the brother's father, was a monster. They have served enough time. I'm curious, Hector, if you could just go on the record here. I mean, they have served since, I think they've been behind bars since '89. They had their trials. Is enough, or is it your point of view that because of the nature of these crimes, they need to stay in there until they're put in a pine box?
Oh, man. So, I mean, by you bringing me on here, I bring a different perspective. I bring the perspective of a correctional staff member working around murderers in general. You know, there's different levels to this. I mean, there's people that are serial killers that killed numerous people. I had a clerk, an inmate that worked in my office. He killed his father with a baseball bat. I read the report. He was in my office, and reading the report, he was a victim of abuse. Now, with that inmate's demeanor, reading the report, that kind of all made sense and added up. He was very respectful. He was very chill. And I'm like, okay, I can see this. The other brothers, I don't get that vibe from that case or them. It's, there's a lot of people that have gotten out that should not have been out, and there's a lot of people in that should be getting out, and there's a lot of people out that deserve to be out. It's just California right now is wild with it. There's no, it's a free for all. That's why I said they may possibly get out.
You are listening to the Roberta Glass True Crime Report, putting the true back in true crime. From New York City, Roberta Glass is now on the record.
Okay, how is everybody? Wanted to discuss today the Menéndez brothers, since it's all in the news that the Menéndez brothers are going to get out with DA of Los Angeles, George Gascon's help. He created a entirely new department to look at convictions and basically undo them, that their office had convicted people. So like, hey, let's get a department together that will look at all the convictions that we've done in previous years and see which ones we can undo. So with the help of Mark Garagos, who's a big-time lawyer, very expensive lawyer. I saw him in action in the courtroom representing Claire Bronfman in the NXIVM cult case. And he had come in because Michael Avenatti and he were now representing Claire Bronfman. Claire Bronfman is the Seagram's heiress, if you don't know. So this does have a point connected to the Menéndez brothers. Just hang on tight with me through this. And Michael Avenatti, who represented the X-rated star that Trump was with. I'm sure my boyfriend will remember her name, but I don't remember it off the top of my head right now. But he had come in to represent Claire Bronfman. She had like a new lawyer. She was the heiress to the Seagram's fortune, one of them. And she had become, for years, she and her sister, huge devotees of cult leader Keith Raniere and the NXIVM cult. And her money really funded it. Her millions really funded it. And she was charged with, really serious charges. And so Michael Avenatti and Mark Garagos got together And Michael Avignati was basically, this is what has been reported, went behind the scenes and went to Nike and was like, I have some, I have some damaging information on you. But he also went to the the Eastern District of New York and was like, I have damaging information on Nike for a federal case for you guys. Maybe it'll be useful to negotiate in negotiating down a deal for Claire Bronfman. Unbeknownst to him, Nike was like, we're not being extorted by you. Forget about it. And he basically had charges filed against him for extorting Nike. But all that came out of his representation alongside of Mark Garagos. So in addition to the fact that Mark Garagos, Claire Bronfman said she found Mark Garagos just like using Google. And then he came in and was like, I've known Claire. And he put his arms on her shoulders. And she was a little girl. So he kind of blew it for her. So he's very likable in court, but also you get a feeling of someone not very trustworthy. So I am a little suspicious of some of this new evidence that's come to light that nobody wanted to talk about. Lyle even says this letter was available 34 years ago, which I don't even understand why you wouldn't want to hand it over to the defense. So there's a letter from Eric to his cousin who testified for him, and it's a little vague. And it was said to be written 8 months before Eric Menéndez was charged with these crimes that he was ultimately convicted of. And then there's also the sworn affidavit, which I looked all day to find the actual sworn affidavit of the Menudo member who said that he was abused by Jose Menéndez, which why didn't this come out? And it's very weird. He's like, I'm in New York, and he insisted on taking a limo back to his house. I was like, that's odd. That's odd. That's a little odd. I mean, it's not an easy distance from New York to Princeton, New Jersey, where they lived. I mean, it's like an hour and 15-minute ride, but okay, all to do a Bill Cosby, essentially. Let's put it that way in YouTube-friendly terms. So about a year ago, when all this was like coming to light, not the George Gascon stuff, but the new evidence, quote unquote. So there was a Menudo documentary where this came to light. And what I'm wondering about, I think is really interesting, is there any connection between Eric Menéndez and the band member who his father was his label, it was a CEO of his label. Was there any connection between him and Lyle or Eric? Does he have a relative that's in prison? Has he been promised anything for these new revelations? Were these new revelations crafted just to get attention and to connect himself to the Menéndez case? See, an attention seeker. None of this we can figure out because he hasn't been cross-examined. And it's very interesting that the Menéndez team doesn't want a new trial. They just want either a new sentencing or an entire acquittal of the case, like just make it vanish, just like acquit them. I think that's unlikely. It's more likely a new sentence and they'll be let out with time served type thing. And we looked at Rosie O'Donnell yesterday, but about a year ago when these revelations of this Menudo band member came out, a CEO officer came out and talked to the New York Post, was like, I was the correctional officer, and higher up, he was a lieutenant, in fact, in the California state prison there. And he's like, I don't think these brothers should ever be let out. Really? It's like they're manipulative. They're dangerous. And he's like, yeah, they haven't been, as far as he knows. We're listening to Rosie O'Donnell, who was saying they have a perfect record. He's like, oh no, they've had infractions, just not violent infractions in prison. We'll listen to all this. He's like, I don't really think they should ever be let out. I watch them carefully. And they are very scheming, running game, manipulative, which is very interesting because what was Rosie O'Donnell warned when she got the letter from Lyle Menéndez when she went to Barbara Walters with it? What did Barbara Walters warn her? She says, he's very manipulative. Lyle specifically. There's a lot of interesting new information. Of course, I'm getting pushback from the Menéndez, the people who feel that the Menéndez brothers should be free, who are very sympathetic to them, the women who are very sympathetic to them. And I just don't see it that way. I just, and there's a lot of reasons, and we'll talk about all this today. And let's just, without further ado, let's get into it. This was from the STS podcast. So this correctional officer went on the STS podcast. This is an edited down version of it because it was extremely long and not all of it. Most of it was not on topic. So I just really edited the portions together where they were specifically talking about the Menéndez brothers. So here we go.
Sure. So you were quoted in the New York Post, and I just want you to start to elaborate on some of this.
So the gentleman on the top is a former convict, and what we're looking at for Rel on the bottom was the correctional officer. Just FYI.
That the sense of entitlement that both Lyle and Eric had would rile you up. What was it about them that made you think that they are entitled?
So just like AB hit it right the nail on the head. You can tell what inmate is about what. Is you get a sixth sense in there, how to feel people. You learn how to read people right off the bat. Like, for instance, Suge Knight. I didn't keep my distance from Suge Knight. I would talk to him, right? Chop it up with him. I didn't feel like I had to withdraw or put up a wall because he was just himself. He was cool to just talk to. The other guys, Eric and Lyle, the vibe that they would put out was not that vibe that's approachable and or ulterior motives in a way. Trying to game you. Manipulation is what you want to call it. I was a lieutenant. At one point, I was a public information officer, which is the right-hand man for the warden. The person that wears the suit, gets in front of the camera, and sometimes escorts tours of outside film crews through the yard. Well, the film crew would take place in a visiting room or the gym area, which is blocked by a door. Either one of the brothers or the two of the brothers were always trying to gain access when they didn't have access to be in that area. The film crew weren't there for them. Clearly, they were not there for them. They were filming a graduation. They were filming a documentary.
So they would. Are you saying that they would try to find the camera? They would want to get FaceTime? Is that what it was?
Yeah, they would just be congregating in an area they shouldn't have been congregating. I have a line.
Which was coincidentally right where the cameras were, which I thought was really interesting. Because there's a part of Lyle's testimony where he's talking to reporters, and he's like, I didn't want to talk to any of them. And it came off as so phony. Like you could hear that lie from a million miles away. So this part I was really interested in. And so as for when he says Suge Knight was great, and so does this other convict who they both love Suge Knight, which to me just means that Suge Knight is better at the manipulation. If you know anything about his violent history, that he's just better at the manipulation and better at making people feel comfortable. I mean, there's a reason why these people go up the ranks of society. And Lyle Menéndez never did. You know, he bought a fast food chain with his blood money, basically. That, of course, fell apart. You know, he's just out of Princeton, like thrown out of Princeton. I was just listening to a documentary. It wasn't a documentary. It was Dominic Dunn's episode. I was rewatching that on Lyle and Eric and Pamela, but I hope I don't mess up her name. But the prosecutor on this case, Bananich, I don't know. I'm getting tongue-tied right now just thinking about it. She was saying, like, she thought that Eric was really the brains behind this operation. And he's always been portrayed as the follower, the emotional one. And she also said that they had proof. And this is also what Dominic Dunn wrote. He felt that he was gay, that Eric was gay. And she thought that that would have informed. She wanted to present it to the court, and Stanley Weisberg didn't let her. So, I mean, she didn't run around screaming that she couldn't put on a case. Also, they had no money for experts when it came to SA and children. So the defense had all these experts, including one whom Leslie Abramson in the second trial rewrote the notes because he went and visited Eric so much, and his notes weren't all that, some parts weren't all that helpful to the defense. So she had him make a new set of notes, which strangely ended up in the prosecution's hand. And it looked like at one time Leslie Abramson was going to be disciplined by the bar for that, but they didn't. But she never had the same career after the Menéndez brothers that she did. It wasn't like a Jose Baez situation where she like just kept doing high profile trials. That was sort of like the height, her time as the Menéndez brothers lawyer, although she was a very successful lawyer before. She was known as a magic maker for accused killers.
Full of inmates that are about to come into a building and they're trying to weasel their way into the line. I'm like, hey, clearly I know who they are. Hey, you're not on the list. That's the kind of. And I shouldn't have to say that. You know what I mean? Is if you're not on the list, you're not on the list. You should know better than that.
And what would their reaction to you pushing back on them?
Well, yeah, I mean, not verbal, like a scoff or like a dirty look. Nothing crazy at all. But just like not happy. They didn't look happy.
and inmates like that, because the vast majority of us do not live in that world or have ever been in that world. So guys like Eric and Lyle, do they have people in the system who will come and say, you got to treat these brothers better? You got to respect them more. Do you ever run across that?
No.
Not
like that. I mean, I'm not going to disclose too much, but I mean, they definitely got their fans. I'll tell you that much. They got their fans.
in terms of what? In terms of fan mail and
fans.
things like that? Yeah.
Fans.
But with.
So what he's going to say later, so he's holding back here, but what he's going to say later is that they had manipulated some of the people in the prison to kind of do their bidding, meaning other correctional officers. So Eric has been caught with cell phones twice. And that's not, as far as infractions go, you know, but they certainly are not the model prisoners that is not a model prisoner. No infractions, they've been the perfect prisoner in all of California that Rosie O'Donnell made them out to be. Yesterday, as I was playing her crazy interview with Court TV. Disturbing. And, you know, someone left me a comment that was super insightful that I hadn't even thought of. And what she said was like, what I get the feeling is that Rosie is hitching her fading star to the Menéndez brothers. I was like, oh, I'm so dumb. I was so dumb. I didn't even look at that angle. Of course, when you have a new podcast, what is it called? It has like the craziest name, like Onward. Is it called Onward? Am I right about that? And it's like has this horrible orange background. I just don't like the color orange. I know it was Frank Sinatra's favorite color, and I love Frank Sinatra, but yeah, Onward. It's called Onward. You know, you have a new podcast, and of course you want people to listen to it. So Lyle Menéndez, you have an exclusive with Lyle Menéndez. Of course, STS says in this interview, Joel says, oh, I'd love to have the Menéndez brothers on. And I get it, you know. I'm repelled from this kind of true crime media, and yet I would probably report on it. An interview with the Menéndez brothers, I would probably, you know, report on it. I just wish we would, you know, I wish we could move away from this kind of true crime reporting. I'm more interested in hearing, you know, from Kitty's family and Jose's family, but to get the convicted killers on to lie to you for an hour and a half, and that's my same problem with the mind hunter John Douglas and all those experts who want to jump into the mind of a criminal. How do you get into the mind of a criminal? With a ladder? I mean, what? I mean, are you a human lie detector?
Are you saying on the inside they have fans, inmates on the inside?
Well, not just inmates. Like I said, I'm not going to disclose too much, right? In time, things will divulge and come out in the wash. But
so maybe people who work there too, I guess, is maybe what you're saying. So Bonnie Lee Lopez says of the brothers, they are pure evil, deserve to rot in prison the rest of their worthless lives. I will never forget the horrific autopsy photos. They are expert liars. I'm a psychiatric nurse of 40 years. Evil. I have to say that I think Bonnie Lee, and she said this before, I don't know for sure, but I would say she's closer to the minority. I think right here, funny Bonnie, you say that.
So Bonnie Lee, I think you're right on for the right on. I think you're right on for the right on, Bonnie Lee. Obviously, that's my position after being a dumb 18-year-old and supporting them and believing every word out of the defense until I actually thought about it. So if you are going to believe the Menéndez brothers, I take the position that you have to believe all of it. You have to say they're either telling the truth or they're not, right? You can't pick and choose what you're going to believe of their story. So their story is that they were abused by both parents terribly, horrifically, in the most extreme ways. And then that they thought that their parents, when Eric discovered that Lyle, who was very close to, was wearing a wig, when Lyle's mother, Kitty, ripped the wig off of his head, it was like the Pandora's box of wigs. All the family secrets came out. That's when they believed that their parents were plotting to kill them, and that for survival, they had to kill their parents. And then strangely, they were spending what would be $1,780,000 in today's money in a short period of, in the matter of months, on Porsches and Rolex watches and Jeep Wranglers and tennis coaches, and to get their metabolism and, you know, how much energy they expend so they could be better perform as tennis players. I mean, really crazy stuff. So like $50,000 a month for a tennis coach. Hold on one second. What?
I said some people more differently than.
My boyfriend's just laughing and he goes, some people mourn differently than others. So yeah, it's a spectrum, buddy. It's a spectrum. I would call that way off. I would call, we've seen people mourn in all different ways, but going on a nearly $2 million shopping spree in the matter of months when they're saying it's not financially motivated sure is off the spectrum of normalcy. But you have to believe that they thought that their parents were going to kill them. and that both parents, everyone talks about Jose, but where's the evidence that Giddy did this? And interestingly, Lyle did not take the stand in the second trial. He was so dying to tell his truth because he knew that the prosecution had evidence this time to bury him basically and kill him on cross. That's why he didn't take the stand in the second trial. That is a really damning detail that doesn't get talked about very often.
Respected psychiatrist in America supports the release. By the way, Sunday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, the show Mindhunter on Netflix is loosely based on Ann Burgess's work. They're making another documentary about her right now. She will be on STS Thursday night. She testified for the defense on behalf of the Menéndez brothers, along with a other doctor named.
See, these are experts that. What can I say about them? I've talked about Dorothy Otnell Lewis. I don't know if you've guys seen the documentary made about her, Crazy Not Insane. I've talked about Dr. Elizabeth Loftus, who's also a expert for the defense. So these kind of experts with their insight into either aspects of the human mind or the human memory. And often, if you've seen my most recent interview with DA John Lewin, who prosecuted Robert Durst, who went up against Dr. Elizabeth Loftus, said, I find her disgusting in what she does. I couldn't wait to rip her apart. Great interview. If you haven't listened to that. I often find that these people like to be around criminals. Maybe they're trying to understand themselves. Certainly, I believe, am I right, that Dr. Ann Burgess was Brian Kohberger's professor? Or am I getting her confused with someone else? And he went into studying the criminal mind for the same reason. She's in touch with the BTK killer. I mean, to say that I believe these brothers because this doctor who was paid by the defense to testify for them believes them. Of course, she's going to have to say she believes them. She took money. She took their blood money and testified for them. So, I mean, it just doesn't hold a lot of weight. And these, I don't know. I don't think a whole lot of these arts of profiling. I think that it has limited application. Most cases are not solved with profiling. Very few are. Can be helpful in a tiny minority of cases.
John Conte, who's an expert in, and both of them, original witnesses, will be on our show Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. To you, AB, some of the people, obviously, Hector didn't speak too fondly of them, but then there was another inmate in there whose name I'm looking for. His last name is Weems, Eugene Weems. He spent time with Lyle at a place called Mule Creek State Prison, and he told the Post he considers him a coward, and went on to say that most of the inmates did not respect Lyle Menéndez because of the horrific nature of the murders. Blasted their parents to death. Speak to me about the type of crimes and how inmates are.
Just to get an aside, I am shocked by what Joel is allowed to say on his program and not get demonetized. I do not have that. YouTube is extremely strict with this channel as far as what I can present and still stay monetized. But I mean, he was just like being really explicit about how this crime was done over and over again. I had to edit it. I was shocked.
Viewed by the type of crimes. I mean, it was a very hideous crime. I mean,
it don't matter. You know what I mean? It's sad that it happened because we wasn't there to know what happened. But at the end of the day, how can a man judge another man in prison for what he did?
Hector, for you, I'm just curious myself. What was the transition like for you from being in combat to then going?
So this is just I cut that down, but he was like, we weren't there. I love that argument. We weren't there. We don't know what happened. And ultimately, we're not in the Menéndez brothers' minds. We did not grow up in that household, but I think we can have an opinion. I respect his opinion about other inmates judging other inmates. But other inmates are probably pretty street savvy and onto their game. I think if the CEO, who's seen a lot of criminals, finds them extremely manipulative and untrustworthy, doesn't think they should get out, it should be listened to, certainly more than Rosie O'Donnell.
Into prison, was it a lot easier saying, hey, I'm not on a battlefield here getting shot at, I'm just dealing with, violent criminals, or was it tough being in there? I mean, how do you view it?
Some skills and experiences like transferred over and others did not. What I had to work on was communication skills. Communication and verbal is number one in prison. Respect is number one. So you don't have a good mouthpiece, you can kick it off. You can set it off. It can go all bad with your words. So I had to learn that words, communication. As far as danger, well, on one end, I was facing roadside bombs. On the other end, I was facing getting stomped out by 200 Southsiders, Mexicans. Because when one goes, they all go. That's the politics. That's the politics. They say you mess with one bean, you get the whole burrito. And that's just being as they say that in Southern California. Now, violence, I saw a lot of gruesome things in Iraq. I saw a lot of gruesome things in prison. Gruesome is gruesome, brains, blood, guts, it's all the same no matter where you see it.
Very eloquently said. I'm glad I didn't see that. But did you have any situations in prison where you were attacked?
Me personally, no. And this is the third time I've said it since I've been out, because I never wanted to jinx myself. And they would ask me while I was still working, have I ever been attacked? I said no. So I did 16 years, never personally attacked, but I had been right there in the mix when my partners had been attacked. For sure.
And when your partners were attacked, I mean, what was it usually over? Was it a respect issue usually?
Let me see. They can be under the influence of drugs and alcohol. They can be a respect issue. They're going to come at you with knives, with weapons if it's a respect issue. A PC move. Let's say an inmate's scared that he rang up a drug debt and he doesn't want to become a victim of an assault. He will rather hit a cop, hit a CO, than to get hit himself, just to get removed from the yard. And a partner told me that one time. He said, you know what, Hector? He knows that we're going to stop. Eventually, we're going to stop, putting the tips on him. The other guys in blue, they're never going to stop. They're going to try to kill him, his peers. So that kind of puts things in perspective.
Wow. AB, Sarah, Ski Hat Sarah, in America, why don't we try to rehabilitate inmates? It's a purely punitive system, which seems cruel. I believe everyone deserves redemption. By the way, AB, Sarah's grandfather helped discover Elvis Presley, being the music guy that you are. Do you think the prison system has a lot of work to do in terms of actually rehabilitating inmates instead of just being babysitters?
They do. They really do. There's a lot of stuff that, is they need to fix it. That's all I'm going to say. They need to fix it. You know what I mean? It's like you got people in prison that don't belong in prison.
Hector, do you think it's a problem that is fixable, or is it purposely done like this, some think, because of politics? What do you think?
It's not. I can probably even say that California is spearheading with the rehabilitative. I just told you there was dogs on the yard that sleeps in the cells with the inmates. They train them. They give them the little doggy treats. They have poop bags that you see in the nice areas. it's all the unethical and corruption and personal gain from up above. It clouds the people above care more about promoting to the next rank than actually the safety and security and the rehabilitative. You see what I mean? Yeah, it's easy to say rehabilitation, but to actually make it work is a whole nother beast, monster.
Exactly. So how we got here is that we tried a lot of these rehabilitation programs, and we tried a lot of these soft on crime policies. And if anyone remembers, when Biden was still in the race, he was getting a lot of criticism for backing the, 3 strikes you're out policy. But how we got there was through a lot of people being let out, and the crime was really high. And Clinton, even go back to Clinton, was running on Democrat, for the young people in the audience, running on 3 strikes you're out. And, we had tried these rehabilitation programs and they hadn't worked. And he's right. You get all sorts of people in the prison system. It also depends on who's running it and what their motivations are. But we really haven't figured out what makes someone not reoffend. Why does one person reoffend and another doesn't? It's still a super mysterious process as to who gets rehabilitated and who doesn't. So it's great. Makes us feel good at the time to say, oh yeah, let's make prisons really, great. Let's do what they do in Norway. That was brought up in Rosie O'Donnell's interview yesterday, that Eric or Lyle or both of them were studying Norway's, which is basically no locked doors. They're all friends with the CEOs. They treat them like men. They, so it's really, it looks lovely. Looks nicer than most. A day in prison in Norway looks nicer than most of our day here in America. But we have a very different culture. And I don't know. I'm glad I don't have to answer this question. If we can get it to work, great. Great. I think we all want the same things, which is less violence. But, when you hear someone like George Gascon saying, well, I learned that if you just prosecute people, stop prosecuting people and let more people out and get rid of prosecutors altogether by just hiring former defense attorneys as prosecutors, we're going to have less crime. Well, the reason that they have less crime, or the reason, they're saying crime is down, is it's less prosecuted, reported. It depends on which, what information you're getting. So, I just want less violence. I want less murders. And I think some of this is also, the whole idea of putting someone in prison, and this is something that Dan Markel wrote about, if you're following my coverage of the Adelson case, which is that it's not all for rehabilitation. Prison's the whole reason to put someone in prison is not just for the prisoner and their personal growth. Some of it, the other half, is also punishment. And those two have to be balanced.
So Hector, back to, some of your quotes, which I'd like to hear from you directly. You said that the Menéndez brothers undeniably have an aura and prisoners look at them as sort of celebrity status. When you say they have an aura, what do you mean by that exactly?
It's like you're out on the streets, you have a famous friend, they have an entourage, right? I'm not saying they have a specific entourage, but they got their aura, people around like, hey, these are the Menéndez brothers. That's what I mean, the aura, the entourage. You just want to stand next to them just to stand next to them.
Yeah.
Is there one or the other that was that you liked a little bit more, that was more tolerable for you?
I'll be honest, I don't know which one's which or how to set them apart. They kind of look similar, and that's not. I never pinpointed them out. Like, I never wanted to explore that avenue.
And then you're also quoted as saying that you were actually unhappy when Lyle transferred in 2018 to Richard J. Donovan. Is that because you felt like they were going to be like stronger in numbers now? They're going to be reunited that was the first time they were reunited, I think, since '96.
No, where that's coming from is a newly promoted lieutenant in 2017. That prison, Donovan, it needs to be closed down because it's ran so horribly, right? So when somebody makes a move like that, I want to bring a brother down to another brother. I'm like, really? Out of the millions of problems that you have at this prison, this is what you want to do. This is what you want to focus your money, your manpower, and your attention on. That's where that mindset was coming from. Like, it's a political stunt.
Yeah, this guy is actually pretty wise. I think it was a political stunt to put the brothers together, and not all that successful either. Hold on, let's just take a little break from this. I found this. I just found that episode, just the pacing of it, even cutting it down. I just wanted to hear about the Menéndez brothers, why he felt that way, what he actually saw. You know, I wanted a little bit more follow-up questions. Obviously, you know, Monday morning quarterbacking is one thing. But here's Eric Menéndez talking about being reunited with his brother Lyle. And so in your head, you think, oh, they haven't seen each other in 20 years. They were sent to different prisons. It would be so great. Now they're like living next door to each other. It's so wonderful. The family reunited. They were so close. It wasn't quite like that. Listen, take a listen.
I've recently been transitioned to be with my brother, and I am immensely grateful to the warden for being courageous to set right a long-standing wrong. That said, there has been a huge misunderstanding about this reunion. Those who attack my wife and demean her posts and accounts attack me and are frankly blind. The reality is that the transition to this new...
Right. Like, you really should not attack these men's wives, prison wives. You know, often it gets thrown around that they have hybristophilia, meaning an attraction to violent men and violent convicts, and meaning that there's something really, either there's something to be mocked, but often these women are really just marks, dupes, targets of these psychopaths, and really suffer in these relationships. So something to think about before you go after some of these wives of these convicts, convicted killers.
Facility and finally being with Lyle again, it has not been easy or without significant challenges. Let's not live in a fairy tale. There's no reason to live in a fairy tale.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
Lyle and I are brothers, but we've also experienced a childhood of sometimes severe and overwhelming trauma and heartache. And as a result, Lyle and I carry a special bond. We love each other. But we're also brothers who have just experienced 20 years of forced separation, unable to even see one another. And this transition has sometimes been very rocky. We have argued and not gotten along well sometimes as we revisit a painful past, traumatic past. And we're doing it from the perspective of adults now and not from...
Adults now? He was 18 and 21 when they committed this murder. What are we talking about here? Adults. Not as children. And as far as like we couldn't see each other for 20 years, you ended the life of your mother, Kitty, who was devoted to you. And then you threw her under the bus and said she abused you terribly in between taking you on private planes to tennis matches and writing your college applications for you. And then said that and then made them to be murderers that were going to kill you, which was strangely the same defense that Leslie Abramson had just been your lawyer, that your family got for you. You killed your parents. They weren't around to get you a lawyer after you killed them. Strangely, Leslie Abramson, they picked her out as your lawyer. You said, oh, I just got lucky because she had such success with Arnel Salvatierra, who killed his father, Oscar, in his sleep. And the same defense was used in that trial very successfully, that he was terribly abused by his father, that he was like Leslie Steinberg. Had she survived Joel Steinberg's abuse, even though Lisa Steinberg was tiny and Arnel Salvatierra was 17 years old, a year younger than Eric when he killed his parents, Jose and Kitty Menéndez. And he got probation. So spare me this. Your parents, there is no reuniting with any of their family for your parents. That's over. They don't have even the opportunity to be uncomfortable or in conflict. But this is the MO of the Menéndez brothers, and what made them so hated in the public by the second trial. It wasn't so much in the first trial. First trial was really just debated. Everyone was watching it and debating it, what happened there, because obviously Jose Menéndez was not the most likable man. They threw them under the bus, right? And something dysfunctional had to happen in that household. And then there was conversations. Did the sons inherit some kind of psychopathy from the bloodline, from the DNA? Or was it nature nurture debate? All sorts of things.
Kids that we were. And so a brother's bond is special, but it's not written in stone. It requires a lot of work in healing and support and love and understanding. And let's not pretend that such a reunion will not be without real difficulty, just as it's not without joy. I've never told anyone that Lyle and I are getting along without difficulty. Such has been posted on Lyle's page. And as of yet, I haven't even discussed that matter or any of this with my Aunt Jonia. And it is hugely disruptive and saddening to me that other people, including people who say they love and support me and my family, will take one side over the other and support one of us against the other. When people go on Lyle's page and simply support him or denigrate my wife, a woman who has stood by my side and sacrificed for me for all of these years, really been there through thick and thin and through hardship and never wavered, and they denigrate her or badmouth her or who badmouth the administrators of the page, it's the same thing as attacking me. I see it as attacking me and denigrating me and being bullying and vicious directly to me. There's no other way to see it. So let's not pretend that it can be otherwise, because.
So what I hear here is Eric, excuse me, not Lyle. Eric is getting in control of his fan base. First of all, he doesn't want them to attack his wife, which I support, but he doesn't want them to take sides. Because he wants them both to get out, right? And he also knows it's not great PR to say that they're fighting in prison. So he's like, we just had trauma to work through. And after the trauma that we went, being ripped apart, I don't want anyone to take one side against the other side on the fan base. So he is manipulating his fan base here, getting in control and telling them what they can and can't say on a Facebook page that he's obviously keeping tabs of in prison through his prison phone, I would think.
The truth is plain to see. And when people simply support Lyle and choose not to support me, then that's clear as well. It's just the reality of life. There's no illusion. I don't want to pretend that it's any other way. I see what it is. To the people who truly care about me and support me, I say this. I say a new and bright path of healing really needs to begin. This bickering is beneath us all. None of the comments that include malicious, divisive statements should be permitted to remain, and they're not going to remain on my page. And frankly, I think that all such comments and posts should be taken down across the board. I think the future is ours to create, and I want to create one.
The future is ours to create. So meaning we can put out the PR that we want. When there's bad PR, I don't even want to see it on the page. If you have anything negative at all to say about me or my brother, I want it taken off the page.
With Tammy and me and my supporters of happiness and joy, and so I thank you.
Now he's selling it as he just wants the whole community to be happy and joyous. And the only way to be happy and joyous is to say the things that he once said and put on his page. No negative PR, or else you're a bully.
Thank you for supporting me, my wife, and my family, and my best to you all.
My best to you all. Oh, woo, that's cold. Woo. Did anyone feel that cold breeze? My best to you all. Woof, woof, woof.
I think you addressed this, but she wants to know what made you want to be a prison guard. Was it just that you're...
Sorry about the difference in volume there. That was just an awfully low video. Now, I hope I didn't blow. I should have warned you. Didn't blow out your eardrums if anyone's listening on earphones.
Father was doing the same work. You came back from the war and you just kind of fell into it?
My father was doing the same thing, and everybody drove the big lifted trucks, had the big houses and the big screen TVs. They were pretty well off, and that's what I wanted as a kid.
Mm-hmm. And Marlena is saying right here, Richard Donovan is here in San Diego. I hear lots of bad things about Donovan. You said you spoke and would hang out with Suge Knight, who's there too. He was just more real to you?
He was a straight shooter. He was a straight shooter. He was cool, laid back, chill. I remember when Snoop Dogg bought out Death Row Records. I seen Suge coming from a visit. I said, "Hey, OG, I'ma holler at you later." He's like, "Hey, you're the boss, man. You're the big boss." I was like, "All right." I didn't get a chance to talk to him after the fact, but just simple conversations like that.
Wow. And what about Sirhan Sirhan? That guy would scare me the most, I think. What's his deal?
I'll tell you what, man. So
I'm going to skip past this. I'm getting even like a little tired of this already. And I cut it down to like a half an hour. But basically he says like, any high profile inmate will be protected. So I'm just going to skip past that.
And then
part.
Hinted at the fact that the prison's warden at the time, a guy named Daniel Paramo, I don't know how to pronounce it, had his own motivations. And you said, why do them a favor? So I guess this goes back to, you're not revealing too much right now, but the bottom line is you feel like there is a lot of politics at play in that system, correct?
I think earlier when I was hinting, when I said there was fans on the inside, when I was hinting and I didn't elaborate, I guess what I meant to say, and I'll speak on this, if there are dirty staff members that bring in contraband to regular inmates, Joe Schmo gangbanger, bring them cell phones and dope, they get caught. Who's to say that they're not going to bring the Menéndez brothers something? They get caught with cell phones coming from somewhere. That's what I meant.
And I think you did, either you or someone I read said that Eric, I think it was you said that Eric twice got caught with cell phones between 2018 and 2021. Did he get the same sort of punishment as, let's say, AB would have gotten?
Yeah, punishment is punishment. It all kind of, it all depends on the circumstances, right? If somebody planted something on her, I was a fair individual. I would look at all totality of the circumstances. So, but when punishment is going to get laid out, it's pretty much fair across the board for the most part.
Brenda says Jose, meaning the brother's father, was a monster. They have served enough time. I'm curious, Hector, if you could just go on the record here. I mean, they have served since, I think they've been behind bars since '89. They had their trials. Is enough, or is it your point of view that because of the nature of these crimes, they need to stay in there until they're put in a pine box?
This is something I find really interesting in true crime. People who say they've done enough time. When they were given these sentences by a judge and a jury who looked at all the evidence, didn't just hear a podcast, like they've done enough time. Isn't it so easy for us who had no feeling for the victims or the victim's family or know the whole details of the case? Just be like, they've done enough time. It's enough time for me. They're not going to be in my area. They don't have to live in my home, my area, right? I don't have to worry about them reoffending. It's just so flippant, really. This kind of like quick thought, like, I believe what they say about Jose, so it's enough time. It's enough time. Well, what about Kitty? What about Arnel Salvatierra? Isn't that odd that Leslie Abramson had a case just the same, with just the same defense, where her 17-year-old client killed his father in his sleep, Oscar Salvatierra, and he got probation for voluntary manslaughter? That's what he got convicted of? Isn't that odd? That right after she's representing Eric Menéndez? Isn't it odd that this letter, where we know that Lyle was writing letters to his cousins, at least one cousin, asking him to lie for him on the stand, that this cousin gets this letter? Why didn't Eric call him? We did have phones back then. I just can't imagine Eric pen paling with his cousin. Seems like something you do from inside jail, awaiting a trial. Trying to tell your cousin what you want him to say on the stand. And by the way, their testimony was so different. Look at their testimony as to the abuse. And look how different it is to Leslie Abramson's closing argument, and her version of the abuse is so much more extreme than what the brothers testified to at the first trial. So much more extreme. It's so much more kind of in the torture realm, sadistic torture realm. Isn't that odd? Isn't it odd that Leslie Abramson doesn't want to advocate for her client? That she's putting out things like, I believed them back. I believed Eric back then, and I believe him now. She's like, the courts have already ruled. Does anybody remember that statement from yesterday? Do I need to go back? I think I need to go back. Hold on, guys. This needs to be talked about. You got to go back to Leslie Abramson and her comments from yesterday. Because I'm just bewildered by these Menéndez apologists, supporters. I'm bewildered by them. Because, one was like, you're so biased. I was like, was I biased when I was a supporter, when I was 18? Or am I biased now? Am I just not biased when I agree with you? All I knew when I was 18 years old is I loved Leslie Abramson in the courtroom. Like I said yesterday, it's like watching a tornado or a hurricane or something. You're not thinking about the destruction. You're just watching in awe of the power of it. Hold on one second. Let me just find this. Here we go.
Hi, Leslie. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Eric's pit bull lawyer, who became a media sensation during his and Lyle's 2 trials in the 90s, retired last year. Abramson has stayed out of the spotlight, but cameras tracked her down in the wake of the news that LA District Attorney George Gascon is reviewing their case for possible resentencing.
How do you feel that the Menéndez brothers might be getting their case reviewed?
I make no comments about my clients, none whatsoever. Attorney-client privilege never died.
The renewed interest in the case is coming on the heels of the Menéndez brothers documentary where they speak from behind bars.
Everyone asks why we killed our parents.
And of course, the Monsters series from Ryan Murphy.
We did it!
Everyone asks why we killed our parents. Do they? Does everyone ask that? Or do some people go, why did you come up with that bizarre story of abuse? I mean, I think I know the answer because it was so successful with Leslie Abramson and Arnel Salvatierra. It's got to be the answer when you're facing, possible death sentence.
Have you seen the documentary, Leslie?
No.
You haven't
Documentary?
I mean, no, on the series on Netflix. Have you?
That I heard about? No, I don't watch any of those.
You're not watching any of it, Leslie?
No, and I didn't watch the last series, and I don't watch any of the shows about it.
Leslie's only comment in the Netflix documentary was, no amount of...
You really think that's true? Don't you think she'd be curious? If Edie Falco portrayed me, I'd want to see what Edie Falco did with the part.
Media nor teenage petitions will alter the fate of these clients. Only the courts can do that, and they have ruled.
See, okay, that's very naive of Leslie Abramson. It's like no amount of petitions. We've seen these things work. We've seen public pressure. What was Serial? When Serial came out, I made an episode called How Serial Will Free a Killer. Now, I couldn't have predicted that the Open Society Foundation would give $50 million to George Soros and he would fund all these defense attorneys to run as district attorney, so there would be no more district attorney to protect these kind of convictions. I mean, it is the most sinister plan. Who could have predicted that back then? Although it was in the works, I just didn't know about it. I thought he was going to get out with an Alford plea, and it looks like Adnan Syed, that may be the route, because now the new DA, who's ideologically aligned, wants to let him out, has to defend this bogus evidence that got him out when Marilyn Mosby, the soft on crime prosecutor who was put in as a defense attorney to act as a defense attorney in the role of prosecutor. It's bizarro world. Was on her way out on fraud charges. But now they have to defend the DNA found on the shoes, on Heyman Lee's shoes, and a statement by a witness who was talking about Adnan Syed. So one of the new suspects that released Adnan Syed was Adnan Syed himself. So we've seen these campaigns, the West Memphis 3, Alford plea, Staircase, Michael Peterson didn't get retried, given an Alford plea. Because also to ask for, once you undo a conviction, it's really hard to retry someone 34 years later. Witnesses die, memories fade, evidence gets lost. And I think that was some of the case in the Staircase. So we've seen these campaigns work. Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey. Brendan Dassey almost got out. Only the courts can do that. So let's look at that statement one more time.
Was no amount of media nor teenage petitions will alter the fate of these clients. Only the courts can do that, and they have ruled.
Like, sorry, you know they've ruled, meaning every appeals court has turned them down. Basically, what she's saying is, I was their defense attorney. I know. I saw the unedited notes from our expert psychiatric witness. I had him edit them. I know the real truth, and they're guilty. I mean, that's really the bottom line. She has to know that these campaigns do work. They do work because politicians get very popular by freeing killers. It is like crack cocaine to Americans. We love freedom in this country, and we cannot get enough of watching the scene of someone getting out of prison and hugging their loved ones in tears. We don't think about what they did. We don't think about whether this was just or whether they might be guilty or whether they might reoffend. We just want like the hit. We want the emotional hit that it gives us. So she knows there's nothing stopping her. She's like, my attorney-client privilege stops me from saying I believed in Eric's innocence back then and as I believe in it now. No, nothing's stopping her from saying that. But boy, is she not saying that.
The next hearing in their case is set for November 29th.
So November 29th, while George Gascon is way behind in the polls to Nathan Hochman, who's running as an independent against George Gascon. They've tried to recall him 3 times unsuccessfully. So I was listening to Patty's Playhouse for a little bit, and Patty had the idea that I was talking about that the Innocence Project is behind this. So there are many people who are aligned with the Innocence Project, like Kim Kardashian, who are supporting the Menéndez brothers. And George Gascon is certainly ideologically aligned, but this isn't a Innocence Project case, just to clear that up. So just to go over it one more time, because it's a crazy concept. What George Gascon did, and I'm going to play the tape, is he took about 50, he says a little less than $50 million from the Open Society Foundation, which is George Soros's group. He's a billionaire philanthropist, to run former defense attorneys who were interested in criminal justice reform as district attorney. And so when we talk about soft on crime prosecutors, and I know this is going to trigger everyone, or Soros prosecutors, everyone gets triggered, right, with that. This is what we're talking about, this program. So if a bunch of people were like, if a bunch of people had gotten together with the help of a billionaire philanthropist on the right and said, we want to get a whole bunch of prosecutors to quit their job and become defense attorneys and work against their clients' interests, it would be such a scandal. But since it's the other way, never mind. So George Soros created an entire department to look at convictions that they prosecuted, to undo them. He also got rid of the department that notifies victims' families. He also changed procedure where they no longer can use gun enhancements. So meaning if someone did a crime with a gun, they can't add on extra years for that. And he let out one juvenile criminal who's already reoffended recently. He's also had scandals in his office with people he's put in. He's never prosecuted a case. Many of the quote unquote prosecutors, they're mostly former defense attorneys that are running around in there, are very inexperienced and overwhelmed. And he also has a ton of lawsuits against him for retaliatory either demotion or dismissal. So if you've been following, DA John Lewin spoke out very strongly against these kind of new policies, what I'd call pro-criminal policies in the George Gascon's DA's office. And he was given an award the year later, a year before, after he prosecuted Robert Durst. They had a whole ceremony and gave him an award. George Gascon did. And then the next year he was demoted from, he's known as King of the Cold Cases, from his cold case unit to a much lower position. But last I heard, it was reported in the paper that he was sneaking back into the cold case division because it's such a mess to try cases. So, there's been scandal after scandal with George Gascon, but here he is talking about how he used the Open Society Foundation's money. Take a listen.
We literally started looking at the map of the U.S. and we were trying to identify strategically what are the urban centers where is anybody that could be considered a progressive prosecutor. There were a couple of people that have been nibbling in some areas, but we just couldn't find one. So one of the conversations was then, how do we go about creating a movement here, which actually eventually led to Open Societies Foundation, which is George Soros Foundation, putting almost $50 million in 2014 through the ACLU to begin the movement. And people like Larry Krasner and others came to my office while they were running for office. In some cases, we identified people to run for office, and then many would come in after getting elected. They send their people in. So, like for instance, Larry's number 2. At one point, spent almost a month going in and out of my office.
That's Larry Krasner in Philadelphia, who has been funded by almost 70% out-of-state money in his last campaign. It was reported, including by the money of the wife of the CEO of Netflix, who also sits on the board of Netflix. So if you're wondering why we're getting this kind of true crime entertainment that is so pro-convicted and pro-release of convicted criminals and what I would call innocence fraud material, there's your answer, especially on Netflix. It's probably the worst of it.
Oh, man. So, by you bringing me on here, I bring a different perspective. I bring the perspective of a correctional staff member working around murderers in general. There's different levels to this. There's people that are serial killers that killed numerous people. I had a clerk, an inmate that worked in my office. He killed his father with a baseball bat. I read the report. He was in my office, and reading the report, he was a victim of sexual abuse. Now, with that inmate's demeanor, reading the report, that kind of all made.
So if you're hearing that squeaky sound behind him, that is the birds. I think Joel has birds. Just FYI. I'm just going to try to go back just a little bit. It's just a really odd squeaky sound.
Demeanor, reading the report, that kind of all made sense and added up. He was very respectful. He was very chill. And I'm like, okay, I can see this. The other brothers, I don't get that vibe from that case or them. It's, there's a lot of people that have gotten out that should not have been out. And there's a lot of people in that should be getting out. And there's a lot of people out that deserve to be out. It's just California right now is wild with it. It's a free-for-all. That's why I said they may possibly get out.
And I think it's interesting that you have your channel, that prison guard, to talk about these issues. I think it's important. Ames, I think, is the one that was calling you out. She's got a comment here. I've heard this guy say one thing, and he's shown his true colors already. I'm not sure what it is. These aren't all violent prisoners. Neither Lyle or Eric have been reported to be violent even once. Do you recall them being violent? And the fact that maybe they have not been violent at all in this time, is that enough to maybe consider releasing them?
I'll give that benefit of the doubt. They probably do not have any violent offenses while in prison. That's probably a fact. Right? But first thing that came to mind, they probably don't have shotguns and old ladies in prison either. So that was just me being spitting off the top of my head. People are gonna move different, right? When you're around lions, you're gonna act appropriate. So that's just what came to my mind.
Did you guys hear that? Those two things I thought were really important. Hi, lovely Sphinx. I'll get to your comment in a second. Thanks. So what he said first was there was another inmate in there who killed his father, and I read his file. And he claimed the same kind of essay as Eric and Lyle, and his demeanor was totally different. I didn't get that feeling from Lyle and Eric that I did. I got a kind of lying grifters, manipulators feeling from, I'm paraphrasing. And he's like, and as for their perfect nonviolent prison records, obviously it's not perfect because they have been caught with cell phones, et cetera, in prison, but it's been nonviolent. He's like, you'll move different. If you're around lions, you're going to act differently than if you're not. It's like, they're also around, he's saying they're also around people a lot more dangerous than he is. Serial killers, etc. in there. Interesting. I thought that was the most interesting part, his most insightful statement. Lovely Sphinx says, thank you, Roberta, for everything you do. Oh, thanks, Lovely Sphinx. You're welcome. Yes, Soros using his billions to destroy America. A lot of installed traitors in high places in our government. Well, I mean, using his billions, I mean, I can only talk about what he did with the justice system. And we're suffering because of it. I mean, it's so sinister to say that we're going to just have two defense attorneys now talking to each other in court. And don't worry, criminals, there's going to be no prosecutors representing the victim and representing the people because everybody's going to be a defense attorney in court. No one on this side of the aisle would be like, oh, let's get a bunch of prosecutors all together and get rid of the defense attorney in court. That's one way to lower crime. It's so deeply hostile to our justice system that is adversarial, that works in opposition. We need two sides. We need defense attorneys and we need good prosecutors. But they don't want good prosecutors there. They don't want anyone there who's going to defend a conviction. So if you're wondering, and when these convictions get overturned, everyone's like, oh, it must be because they're really innocent. It must be because these claims have merit, because our press is so poor at reporting this. Our local press tends to be really good on crime, but our national press is so poor. When Adnan Syed got out, everyone was like, oh, it must be because they have great new evidence of innocence. It took you 3 seconds to look at the actual filing that let him out and be like, this is ridiculous. The DNA on her shoes, not on her feet, but in the back of her car. A new suspect that's actually Adnan Syed himself. And this other suspect that was totally looked into who found her body. Like, that was already. And then you have Adnan Syed, who had an accomplice who confessed everything. And then they're trying to make it a DNA case when we know his accomplice said he wore gloves, red gloves, when red fibers were strangely found. I mean, it's not, these cases aren't, I mean, we're just like hooked on innocence in this country. It's like a magic word. It's like a religion to people. Everyone has such an emotional reaction to seeing someone get out that their critical thinking goes out the window. So all you have to do in this case is cry abuse and nobody's going to think critically. Wait, were their parents? What was their defense? What did they testify to under oath? That their parents were going to kill them? That this was coming from both parents? Strangely, what, Lyle didn't testify in the second trial? Their expert witness, the psychiatrist, had his notes rewritten by the defense attorney. All those are, I mean, and they had a multi-million-dollar defense. It was so well moneyed. You know, but the way this is spun is like, well, the first trial was more fair because so much more evidence was let in. It wasn't that they had a multi-million-dollar defense team that was allowed to basically run the courtroom and bring in everything, relevant or not, and put Jose and Kitty on trial. And in the second trial, it was limited. It wasn't entirely that they weren't allowed to argue the same kind of essay, abuse excuse defense. P.S. There, just saw a post from, I think it was on Facebook. It was from a prosecutor saying, I prosecuted a woman and I believed her claims were true, but she was an adult and she could have left. We cannot just say, oh, you had a bad childhood, then that's a license to kill. Oh, I have sympathy for you. You're well-mannered. You speak well. You look good in a pastel sweater. Oh, that's a license to kill.
They, yeah, people are gonna act on opportunity. People are opportunists. You know what I mean? So maybe they haven't gotten out of pocket in prison because they know it's not gonna end well for them.
Maui Swift says, were the people in this new documentary about the Menudo brothers, were they paid? I have no idea if that is the case. And Bonnie Lee Lopez, who is the psych nurse in a prison system, says, I saw correctional officers sliced open from shanks, had to pronounce inmates dead after hangings.
So Maui Swift, hey, Maui Swift, is a listener of this show, smartly, after watching a lot of my shows, goes, well, yeah, what happened? Was anyone paid to write that letter? Was anyone offered anything to write that letter that appears? Where did these claims come from? And Joel just like throws it away like, let's not answer that question. We don't know. We don't know the answer to that. Let's not even consider it. But I'll talk all day about these claims like they're totally true because that's what's popular with my audience. Watch A Murder in the Park. Watch that documentary, or read Martin Pribe's book, Crooked City. Why I say watch A Murder in the Park is because you can watch what went on behind the scenes in that, which was a case of Anthony Porter, who killed a couple in a Chicago park, was given the death penalty. He was a gang leader. And they had a bunch of Medial Innocence Project. So journalism students at Northwestern in the Medial Journalism School reinvestigate the case from a position of innocence. Important witnesses weren't interviewed. If they were interviewed, they were either guilted into changing their story. Other witnesses were offered book money, documentary money, I think movie money. I don't think it was documentary. I think it was movie money. Excuse me. To lie, and did. Another witness had a relative in prison that they wanted helped out. So how do we know that there's not some connection here between this Menudo, former Menudo member who's, if you know anything about the music business, if you've been out of it for years and years and years and you didn't write your own songs, there's not much money in it years and years later. And there is some connection between he and the Menéndez family. Is he saying this because he's an attention seeker? Was he offered something by Mark Garrigos? Did he think it would help his documentary? Was he offered documentary money? I mean, we just don't know. He hasn't been cross-examined. All we know is that he's alleged to have signed an affidavit. If anyone has the actual affidavit, I'm looking for it. My email address is in the about me on my YouTube. RobertaGlass23@gmail. Send me a copy. I'm looking for Roy Rosello's affidavit. Shoot it my way.
You never forget the horrors of incarceration, which is why I asked Hector about the parallels, even though they're far and few between, but there are some comparisons between war and the prison system because a lot of heinous things go on. Tina Mindful joining us from Germany here. So moving on here, back to this guy, Eugene Weems, for a minute. And AB, this one's for you. So he spent time with Lyle Menéndez at a place called Mule Creek State Prison, and he referred to Lyle as a coward. But he said he wrote a book himself, by the way, this guy Weems, called Prison Secrets. And he said, AB, this is a quote, "You can't act like you act. You can't do that, you know," Weems says. "You can't act like you're better than everyone in here. These dudes will kill you, bro, like for real. You're not built like that. You're a feline." You know what I'm saying? So Weems was calling Lyle a feline. What kind of insult or reality hit is that for Lyle Menéndez to hear in the prison system that he's basically a cat?
Let me say this. Being in prison, you in prison for whatever you did, right? So you go.
I wouldn't mind being called the feline. That's my cat. One of them. I wouldn't mind being called the feline. But I think it's interesting that his fellow inmates don't are onto him, and the COs onto his manipulation. There is one, I think we heard earlier, I think we already passed it, right? Where he's talking about how he was really nice to one inmate, I think Lyle or Eric was, and hooked him up. And he's like, that's what we do in prison. That may be coming up.
On there to prove to somebody that you're a real killer again, they already say he killed already. So you back a mouse down to a corner, he gonna come out that corner. So everybody's a coward to somebody because everybody's a thug. But as soon as you do something to one of them, they're gonna be the first one to press charges and say you assault them.
Right.
You get where I'm coming from? At the end of the day, you rather be a coward to go back to the world than being that thug that he gonna be being there for the rest of his life. So you got to ask yourself, what you proving?
Right.
You know what I mean? Why should I prove that I need to kill you in this cell and just add 30 more years to my life? You're not even worth that, because guess what? I'm gonna be that coward, right? That you say I am. I'm gonna send you a picture of your girl while this coward.
Right. So he's like, basically, it's not worth it. It's not worth to get into a fight with this guy because I'll be out. I'm not going to get another charge, you know, oh, I'm sorry, you know, to fight with you in prison. I'm just trying to go past it because it's just really laborious. Let's get to the good stuff.
My glasses on them. You know,
You are the brothers housed together. Are they in the same 6-person pod together?
I don't know if they're in the same cell, but they're definitely in the same yard. Probably in the same building.
And what is, to you, what's the relationship seem like? Do they seem like best buds, brothers that are like inseparable, or do you see it another way?
Like brothers. For some reason, I thought maybe they would fight when they first got together. I don't know. That happened. Brothers fight, but now they get along. They get along.
And do you consider them?
Interesting. Obviously, there were reports of them fighting, and Eric backed that up, said that they did fight when they got back together. But there's this part where they talk about, you know, it was interesting. I guess I skipped past it, but there's one part in this interview where the ex-convict, he asked him about this one convict saying Eric Menéndez was really nice to him. And he's like, that's what you do in prison, because you never know, this person might get out. They might be able to help you and send you pictures or send you money or do something for you on the outside. He's like, you're also trying to surmise who they are and get close. I mean, it was so predatory, his description of the whole thing. He's like, and then he kind of like wraps it up, because that's what we do to be a good person. But really what it is like, we want to see how they can be useful to us in prison. So of course you make alliances and you try to it's for you as much as it's for them, what they can do for you. These people might be able to do something for you. It's a little bit more like Survivor. It's like maybe prison sounds like a cross between Survivor and high school.
I mean, they're pretty well educated. I mean, do they seem like smart guys with, do they stand out a little bit? Because they went to Princeton. They probably, are a little more proper. I know. I don't know. Are they like two sore thumbs?
Yeah. They're two sore thumbs because of who they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You always see.
So 65 CJ5 says Professor Kevin Dutton's book, Wisdom of Psychopaths. Dutton, a psychologist from University of Oxford, argues the defense attorneys are high-functioning psychopaths. And there's also a lot of psychologists and psychiatrists who go to bat for these killers who I think are high-functioning psychopaths.
Their old photos are in like little polo sweaters draped over their shoulders. that kind of look. Cindy Hollenbeck, who's a friend from the Moscow Pullman area, it's been well documented that Eric and Lyle could not leave. Jose would not allow it, so they were stuck in there. Bonnie Lee Lopez.
I mean, come on. And he just goes by that like it's fact. They were stuck in there. They didn't have feet. They didn't have feet. They didn't have access to a phone. They could never get away from their father. That's something that I was listening to Rosie O'Donnell today. She was arguing that Eric Menéndez had to have an off-campus apartment. So Lyle was always had access to him. They couldn't get away from him. They couldn't hand him over to the police. Come on. They couldn't leave, break contact, turn him in, any of the above, go to any of their relatives, their extended family, or their friends. They had friends or cousins who were so happy to lie for them on the stand, in my opinion.
Convict versus inmate, very correct. As we are battling those birds singing. The birds are happy.
So yeah, they don't stick out. They definitely make good convicts. They make good convicts. They're convicts. They walk where they're supposed to walk. They don't bother you. They didn't bother me, like I said, except trying to gain access to areas when they weren't supposed to.
So he's like, they tried to game the system. He's like, but what he's saying is good convicts, to answer Rosie's questions, like they were so perfect people. They haven't been violent before or since, which we don't really know. I think that also, what hasn't been discussed tonight is that they were also robbing the neighbors, in multiple robbery stings. And these were huge, hugely, emptied houses, basically. Got pulled over by the police with a whole bunch of stuff that they robbed in the back. And Eric was convinced, because he was a minor, he was 17 at that time, to take the fall for all of it. Say it was all his doing, because it would have had bigger consequences for Lyle. And then Jose Menéndez paid back the neighbors, I think it was like $10,000 or $11,000 for the stuff that they stole. So that, all those things point to agreed motivation. And I can't find anything about something Rosie said, that the first grand jury wouldn't indict. I've never come across that. I'm still looking for it, because they didn't believe the greed motivation. But it was totally argued. Doesn't seem right, because the prosecution basically argued that in their first and second trial.
When I was trying to keep the area secured. But no, other than that, they mind their P's and Q's. They're convicts.
Ames might be married to one of these guys. She keeps coming back. Why are you pinning comments against the brothers and not one of the many supportive ones, which I'm getting to right now?
We've heard nothing but support. I mean, I think we've heard one or two. We heard Maui Swift's question, was Roy Rosello getting paid. And then we heard one from the psychiatric nurse who said they give her the willies, that they're psychopaths and they should never be let out. But every other comment has been totally supportive. So what are these people talking about?
Now, Ames. So relax, Ames. So there's a rap artist named Anna Ray X-Rated Brown. X-Rated Brown. I like that, as in the Raiders, X-Rated. He was serving 26 years for murder. He says that both Lyle and Eric were mentors who helped guide him. He was a former Crips gang member to freedom. He said that Lyle and Eric went out of their way to help change his life, to get him into the programs, prison programs like Narcotics Anonymous and anger management. AB, this guy's a rap artist. That's your world of music and rap. He says that these two brothers did everything they could to help him. Do you buy it? Do you believe it?
Yeah, but you know what? Every listen, that's what inmates do. That's what convicts do. It's just basic. What else you got to do? You know what I mean? If you find somebody that respect you who you are, not on no fan, you know what I mean? You got people that walk the yard just talking and, you know, being around each other, learning each other.
So here's where he's saying we keep an eye on who they are. We help each other out because they could get out.
You know what I mean? It's only right that we sit here and help one another elevate, because that young dude, the rapper, probably is going home soon. So
right, kid's going home soon, could help us out. Let's talk about the Menéndez brothers, right? Hiring a computer expert to get into the computer and erase Jose's will that he was working on. Essentially getting rid of the will that was going to disinherit both of them. There's another motivation for murder.
He felt they got a good friend that they help, and he gonna always look out for them. They need something. Really, they don't need nothing, but it's just a simple fact where mail, pictures, everything they doing.
Right, we could get mail. All right, I've had enough of this. You get the idea. The corrections officer found them sus. Let's look at this. I thought this was interesting because I came across, this is not a YouTube account that I'm super familiar with, but it's Brett Cooper, the comment section. My understanding is that she's conservative, which I thought was interesting because I came across her talking about Sheldon Johnson. So if you don't know who Sheldon Johnson is, he was on Joe Rogan's show. He comes from a generational, basically a family of convicts and criminals. And he's been written about. His son was killed. He's was involved from a juvenile law, and his father was a crackhead. I mean, just, you know, and he was brought on the Joe Rogan show by Josh Dubin, who was Charlie Adelson's jury consultant and who is an Innocence Project ambassador. And he said he was a miracle, that he was given too much time. So what happened with Sheldon Johnson is that he reoffended. He was up in front of the same judge for very similar crimes, robbing and beating and robbing, basically. And the judge said, the next time, I'm going to let you off this time, give you a second chance, because you weren't really given a chance with your father and your family situation, et cetera, et cetera. And the next time you're up, I'm going to throw the book at you. So he did the same exact thing. It was like an attempted murder charge with a gun, I believe, if I'm remembering these in order correctly. And he gave him 50 years. So he was on Joe Rogan as a miracle of rehabilitation. He had done yoga and meditation in prison. 2 weeks after appearing on Joe Rogan, Sheldon Johnson killed his friend, who lived in the same building, I believe, as he did, if I understand this correctly. or nearby and dismembered the body and was caught in going in and out of the building in disguises. And he was so entrenched in this wrongful conviction movement, you know, what do you call it? Restorative justice movement, that he was working with the public defender's office. They all came to support him at his arraignment. His next arraignment is in June, I believe. And as he was being carted off, he was saying, I was innocent. So Brett Cooper was very critical of Sheldon Johnson in her video. So I wanted to show her take on the Menéndez brothers. So when I saw that she was talking about the Menéndez brothers, I thought this would be really interesting to look at how she talks about this in relation to how she talked about Sheldon Johnson. Very critical of Sheldon Johnson and the idea of restorative justice, et cetera, et cetera. But now the Menéndez brothers want to get out, and she's changed her tune. Very different. Take a listen.
So there's a new season of the series Monsters airing on Netflix right now, and it is following the story of the Menéndez brothers. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with this case, in 1989, two brothers killed their parents in what at the time seemed like cold blood. It happened around the same time as the televised OJ trial, so these brothers were also televised in their respective trials about the murders. However, those famous trials ended up resulting in hung juries, and the brothers were retried together rather than apart, and the second trial was not televised, and key information was left out of the case. And in this trial, the brothers were found guilty and they were sentenced to life in prison. And like with all other dark and infamous murder stories, Hollywood decided to make a TV show out of it. Well, actually, this is like the 5th TV show that has been done about it. And perhaps in the long run, this could actually be good for the brothers because new attention is being brought to their case. It might impact the outcome of a retrial so many years later. But right now, people aren't happy. Before we dive into this story, though, make sure that you like this video, subscribe to the comment section channel if you've not already, and of course, hit that notification bell so that you never miss one of our episodes. Now, this season of the show Monsters, which is an anthology series that is on Netflix, was produced by Ryan Murphy, who is the least surprising person on earth to be involved in something like this, but we will get into more of that later. And Ryan Murphy knows that this show is going to get the Menéndez brothers a lot of attention, and while that's probably, a good thing for them in their retrial, many people online think that the way that he is speaking about the brothers and the success of the show is absolutely vile because it doesn't seem like he actually cares about the brothers as people and has misconstrued their story. And folks are worried that
he doesn't care about the convicted killers. He's not sensitive to their feelings, guys. He's very insensitive to the convicted killers' feelings.
this is just pure Hollywood exploitation, which obviously we have seen before. Now, an example of this is in a recent interview that he did with The Hollywood Reporter. And Murphy's comments quickly.
Right, but when you make a pro-Menéndez documentary, they're giving that away on Netflix. Nobody's making any money from that. And there's no agenda behind that, right? That's a non-for-profit. Nobody's reeling in the cash making a pro-Menéndez documentary that's on Netflix at the same exact time as Monsters. By the way, Monsters has plenty of pro-Menéndez side. It just has some of the critic side as well.
Went viral for all the wrong reasons. He said, "I'll tell you my thoughts about the Menéndez brothers. The Menéndez brothers should be sending me flowers. They have not had this much attention in 30 years, and it's gotten the attention of not only this country, but around the world. There's sort of an outpouring of interest in their lives and in the case, and I know for a fact that many people have offered to help them because of the interest of my show and what we did. There is no world that we live in where the Menéndez brothers or their wives or lawyers would say, you know what, that was a wonderful, accurate depiction of our clients. That was never going to happen, and I wasn't interested in that happening." So he's not just saying that that was ever going to happen because, obviously we don't know the truth and it's Hollywood. He was saying he genuinely did not care if what he put online was the truth. And then that whole line about they should be sending me flowers. I mean, cocky much? Now, that line specifically got attention across all social media and people were pissed. They were posting pictures of him with that quote, getting millions and millions of impressions and comments. One person said they were brutally when they were children, which is part of their story and part of the confliction in their story, allegedly by their own father, and their mother knew and did nothing. Ryan is profiting off of their trauma, paid them nothing, and yet he expects a round of applause. Somebody said their story blew up in 2020 on TikTok, which is
their trauma, profiting off their trauma. They're profiting off of their murder. And so is the person who makes the pro-Menéndez documentary, et cetera, et cetera. Everybody who talks about true crime is profiting off of a crime in some way. And if you're going to talk about true crime, you have to think about how you want to do it. You know, I happen to think that the way to do it is to talk about the victims and not to make the killers folk heroes. But that hasn't been a popular way to go about it. And examine how our justice system really works and who's really trying to pull it apart. I mean, this has not been an easy road. If you want to expose innocence fraud in this country, which is sweeping the country, this kind of innocence fraud is not an easy road. It will win you not many friends.
True. After gathering support from numerous people, they do not owe you. You owe them an apology, which is completely accurate. Like, this man is basically acting like he's God, like he's giving them attention after 30 years. No, there's been like 5 shows made about them. There's a new documentary that's coming out. There are other documentaries that have been made, and they have been viral on TikTok every once in a while for years at this point. Like, I constantly see them. Like, at this point, it's basically as common as me talking about rough greens. Now, as you guys know, I take my health really seriously. I'm cautious about what I eat, what products I use on my skin, and obviously I want.
And obviously, she's got to let's move past the sponsor, shall we? What is this for? Dog food, green dog food. Let's try to move right past that.
So basically, the point is, we've heard this story a lot at this point, especially if you're somebody who uses social media regularly. Like Ryan Murphy, you did not do that. You're just profiting off of that attention that already existed. Somebody else commented and said, "Monster, the Ryan Murphy story." When? Yeah. I mean, people do not like this guy. And Ryan Murphy just seems hell-bent on being an ass, and according to the Menéndez family themselves, hell-bent on fabricating the brothers' story. Now, to be fair, in some ways, the show does follow the crux of the crime and their trials.
Fabricating the story according to the Menéndez, because they didn't follow every word. Because it has some skepticism as to the convicted killer's word and brought in a little bit. I haven't finished Monsters yet. I'm still in the middle of it. But wouldn't it be great if any of these young people had any problem when they were lied to repeatedly, say by making a murderer or serial or any of the other a dozen zillion innocence fraud project? I mean, he doesn't care about the truth. When they completely obscure the victim and make the killer out to be a saint and a hero. Wouldn't it be great if Brett Cooper had the same kind of response to some of that material? The killer's feelings are getting hurt, guys.
To a T, like in this clip where they filmed the trial scene exactly how the live trial was filmed decades ago. Just watch. That's crazy. But in other and arguably more important respects, such as the way they portrayed the boys, Eric, Lyle, which are the boys' names, and their family apparently.
The boys, they were full-grown adults, Brett. Full-grown adults. 18 and 20, or what was it, 20 or 21?
Do not find the portrayal fair. And they even put out a statement expressing this. Ryan Murphy's Monsters, the Lyle and Eric Menéndez story, is a phobic, gross, anachronistic, serial episodic nightmare that is not only riddled with mistruths and outright falsehoods, but ignores the most recent exculpatory revelations. Our family has been victimized by this grotesque shock drama. The family said that Murphy's portrayal leaned on reporting from Dominique Dunn, the late writer, journalist, and producer who covered the Menéndez trial, rather than the family. Murphy, quote, never spoke to the family. And of course, because he doesn't seem to care, Murphy basically discounted that entire thing. He said, yeah, I didn't speak to them, and who cares? I don't care if they're unhappy with it. And the show itself is...
Right on, Ryan Murphy. I don't care so much about the convicted killer's feelings. Good for you. I just wish more people would care about the victim's feelings in these cases. But the Menéndez brothers have done such a good job of absolutely demolishing Kitty's character in Jose that it made him completely non-human. So it doesn't matter that they were murdered. It's all a justifiable homicide. So if you're unlikable like Jose, it's just justifiable homicide. Let's make murder legal, guys. If you're spoiled rich kids, and you don't want to really get a job and you want to spend $50,000 on a tennis coach and a Porsche and Rolex watches, you can just murder your parents.
Extremely vile and disconcerting. It's very uncomfortable to watch. And similar to the reaction of the Dahmer Netflix show, many are upset at Hollywood's decision to air out the use of real people for monetary gain, where, yeah, they get attention, but they don't actually benefit financially at all. And people online are not holding back. Just watch.
Ew.
Well, hey, guess what? You want the killers to benefit? We don't have a Son of Sam law. When the Menéndez brothers get out, they will benefit totally. After the Julius Jones, what was that called? That documentary? There was two sides of it. One side was about Darlie Routier, and the other one was about Julius Jones. They filmed in the victim's driveway. They recreated the scene with zero permission. No one asked the Howe family how they felt about that. Where's Brett Cooper's rage when those kind of things happen? What about when the Heyman Lee's rights were trampled all over? After Julius Jones documentary, he was making $30,000 a month from prison selling T-shirts and other items, because we don't have a Son of Sam law mostly. In most states, we don't. And if we do, they're mostly not enforced. Or how about the West Memphis Three when they got out? They were allowed to write books. Amanda Knox, $30,000 a pop for speaking engagements.
I just watched a video of one of the Menéndez brothers in court relaying his experience. They made a show off this trauma, and I considered watching it, and are we up? Are we all up?
Probably.
What is going on?
Yeah, because some of us, like me, don't believe them, believe it was made up. Because you got to believe that both parents, if you want to believe the Menéndez brothers, you got to believe both parents did it, and that they thought that their parents were going to kill them. These young people are like, what? Someone says they're abused? This is terrible. Believe all accused people facing possibly the death penalty on trial for their future freedom. Just believe all of them. Especially people accused of killing their parents. Believe all of them. They say abuse, just believe them.
I'm kind of in shock. I didn't really know about this story until I just saw that clip of the courtroom. What are we doing?
I mean, it's insane. And it's not just that.
What are we doing? What are we doing making these killers heroes? What are we doing, guys?
They're airing out their trauma, but they took such...
They're special. They're very special. Very special. They have to be protected, airing out their trauma. Their trauma was already aired out. It's already in the public domain, guys. You're just finding out about it now. Their trauma. Come on. It was a performance. It was a coach performance. There was one part where I was listening to Leslie Abramson in court talking about she doesn't know what it means to prepare her client and what the word preparation means. She doesn't understand the word preparation. She was getting very upset at the accusation that she essentially coached her client. Why isn't Leslie Abramson defending them? Why are all these yahoos who know nothing about it defending them and not Leslie Abramson? Give you a hint. She's not getting paid enough to lie for them anymore.
Liberties with the story.
At least not for Eric.
And in an interview.
And not for Lyle either.
One of the creators was saying, we wanted to show the story from every possible angle. And apparently they have like some hints of in here, like alleging that maybe the brothers were in some sort of weird sexual relationship, which like did not happen. And they're appalled by that. It's so weird. It's so creepy. Somebody commented and said, I got one episode in where I was like,
well, now that we're making stuff up, let's just go hog wild, right? But you definitely know something that this traumatic experiences did happen to the boys. How do you know? Now Brett Cooper is an expert on what did and did not happen.
was like, I cannot watch this. This is somebody's life. Another person said, Ryan Murphy is vile. He knows exactly what he's doing. I hope the Menéndez brothers are able to sue. Another person said, making a show about this is insane. It's not entertainment. You're totally spot on. What are we doing? Another person said, Ryan Murphy is one sick freak. And this really has started to be the recurring theme in this whole controversy, which is Ryan Murphy being creepy. And it reminds me of another quote that he gave the Hollywood Reporter during that interview, where he was asked if he was going to watch a new Menéndez brothers documentary that was coming out in light of the success of his show, to which he responded with this. He said, I'm not going to watch it because I'm not interested in anything else about the Menéndez brothers. I don't want to watch the documentary. I have no interest in meeting them. I have no interest in talking to their lawyers or their wives. I've sort of just done it because I was telling a bigger story, a cultural story. I wasn't doing a biography of them.
I can understand that. I've done it. I've done all my research, and I'm not interested in meeting the killers and having them lie to me or their lawyers. I have my opinion. But I think the point of this is that Brett Cooper doesn't like Brian Murphy.
Literally were. Then what else were you doing? Using their names to create fake stories about two very real people with a very...
Speaking of fake stories, how do you know you weren't told the fake story, Brett? How do you know? So I happen to think you were. You're going to argue that that it's just an interesting coinky-dink that Eric Menéndez's lawyer represented a case just like this before Eric Menéndez, of which she got her client, her 17-year-old client, Arnel Salvatierra, who killed his father, probation after claiming this same kind of horrific trauma. Are we going to say that it's just totally believable that both parents would do the same kind of traumatizing actions? And that they thought that their parents were going to kill them and that they just coincidentally spent $1.78 million in a matter of months? Oh, that was normal spending. Roberta, that's normal spending for them. They just had that in their bank account from their 0 jobs. They didn't have to say rob their parents' friends beforehand. Guys, you're picking on them. You're picking on traumatized children. 21 and 18.
Real family? I was telling a story about a certain place and time. Listen, I'm sure that they will be thrilled with that documentary because a lot of it is supposedly in their own voices. Yeah, of course they will be. Apparently there's new information that they claim, including about the sexual abuse from their mother, who they claim sexually abused them. Like, he's just discounting all of it and acting like it doesn't.
Right, because it's unlikely that it happened. He's saying, I don't believe them. It's unlikely that it happened from both parents. And the more you watch them in full on the stand, both their direct and cross, the less believable it is. It only works in like little clips. And then you get to see, then the seams begin to show. You get to see how you were bamboozled when it's slowed down. It's like a shell game. You know, you're just like watching where the ball goes under the cups, and then you realize how you've been bamboozled. I think I've
doesn't matter because he's doing something that's more culturally relevant. A bigger story. What is a bigger story to these people? You're telling their story. That's the story. You can't make that into something else. I don't even know what you're trying to communicate. Like, he is turning the most intimate, grotesque details of multiple people's lives into entertainment, real people. And yet he seems completely void of any feelings or empathy towards the real people in the story. Like, as a creator telling said story, it just seems incredibly off-putting. And I understand wanting to walk a fine line and not falling into the trap of straight up, romanticizing criminals that many women do these days. We've talked about that, and actually, portray it as true, real crime. But to genuinely just care so little, like, you can want to tell the story as it is and the fact that they are technically criminals, while also showing some decency because they are real people, especially when there is a story of abuse was covered up and lied about for years, especially after Gypsy Rose was just released after murdering her mother and was welcomed into the public with open arms and empathy.
And I was critical of that too. That's a problem too. And there's certainly major problems with her story too. She was an adult too. And there's Facebook groups devoted to calling her out on all her lies. And she's cashing in too, which you don't have a problem with. You don't have a problem with murderers cashing in. Just other people who are critical of them. All right. I think that's what I have for today. I think that's all I can take of Brett Cooper, but that will give you an idea. If people are well-spoken and have a sob story, then we can be sympathetic to them, which is odd because that's exactly what Sheldon Johnson had. He had a sob story. I was a victim of my parents, my upbringing, et cetera, et cetera. Everybody was, feeling badly for him, including the judge, till he reoffended. And then reoffended quite seriously after getting out. It's really narcissism. It's our own narcissism. We want to feel like good people. Good people. We're not like the baddies who want them locked up, want to keep people safe. We're the good people, want to free them and hold them and hug them and just excuse them for all. We understand. It's totally understandable that you would murder your parents in one of the most brutal killings California history. And then go on a spending spree. That's because you were so traumatized. Come on. You're smarter than that. All right, that's what I have for today. Please hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, share this episode, and I'll be back. I'm off tomorrow, but I'll be back maybe Tuesday, 6 p.m. Eastern. Have a great night, everybody.
Ice cream on the table, TV on the tube. Give us the victim label. Everything you heard is true. Your mom and dad, the sinner and kids made us blue. Crack dealers, wells, is it boo-hoo or hoo-hoo? We did it for the money. We consoled ourselves with Rolex watches, hand-tailored suits, ran our hand over designer fabric swatches, broke into the computer. Rewrote that will. A Jeep Wrangler for a lady, paid with bloody dollar bills. We did it for the money. Kim Cable leaves us, so does Rosie. Oh, strangers weep, we had it so bad. It's the Menéndez Brothers show. Just release us from prison. We'll play victims so well. Squeeze out some tears. The truth we never tell. Looking for suckers to manipulate emotions. Someone with empathy, enough to fill oceans. Just break these prison bars. They'll appear on your YouTube show. Lie and sob and wink. If you know, you know. We did it for the money. We did it for the money. We consoled ourselves with Rolex watches, hand-tailored suits. Ran our hand over designer fabric swatches. Broke into the computer, rewrote that will. A Jeep Wrangler for a lady, paid with bloody dollar bills. We did it for the money. Kim Cable leaves us, so does Rosie. Oh, strangers weep, we had it so bad. It's the Menéndez Brothers show. Just release us from prison. We'll play victims so well. Squeeze out some tears. The truth we never tell. Looking for suckers to manipulate emotions. Someone with empathy, enough to fill oceans. Just break these prison bars.